Hi there. In this video, we once again have a table which has monthly sales data for an entire fiscal year, and what we want to calculate is the change of each month from the previous month. So we want to know how much higher or lower the total sales is in March from February. So here it looks like it increased. We want to know how much it increased by. Here it looks like it decreased. We want to know how much it decreased by. So to do that, we're going to have to figure out a way to get the total sales from the previous month, which we're going to do by referencing a previous step, or more specifically, a element from a previous step. So let's get started. We're here at referencing previous steps.xlsx. We're in the previous month growth. I guess it should say previous month change sheet, but I've called it previous month growth. I did change because it's easier to calculate. Here's the data we want to work with. So let's click on it, head up here to Power Query, get our data from a table. There we go. Okay, so to start off with, we're going to go ahead and head over to Add Column, and we're going to add an index column, and we're going to add an index column from 0. So we're going to click on this little thing here and click on from 0. And so this is just every row's got a number starting at 0 and going up by 1, and what it ends up being is the correct ID for each one of these rows. So if you remember, the first row in a table is always row 0, and here the index is 0. The second row in a table is always row 1, or is row index 1. So it's 1 right there. The third row is row index 2. So currently this number corresponds to the actual row of each row in the table. So I'm going to go ahead and change this. Rather than having it say index, I'm going to have it say row ID. I think that's a bit more helpful, easier to understand. So to do that, I'm going to head up here to View. If Formula Bar is unchecked, I'm going to go ahead and check it. So I've got this guy right here. I'm going to click there. So the second argument is what we want to name the index column. Well, we're not going to call it index. We're going to call it row ID. In fact, let's call it current row ID. That's nice and descriptive. Okay, so the number here currently refers to this row's ID. What if we want to refer to the previous row's ID? Well, that's pretty easy. All we have to do is add a custom column. It takes the current row ID and it subtracts 1. That is the previous row's ID. So we're going to call this previous row ID. And click OK. So now, while this number is the number of the current row, this number here is the number of the previous row. So this 1 actually would refer to this row right here. So this 1 is corresponding to that right there. So if I were to head up here and grab, let's head up here and grab 1. When I hit enter, it's going to grab this row right here, right? So I click OK. Sure enough, it grabbed that row. So I'm going to remove that. So now, the next thing we want to do is we're going to go ahead and refer to the previous step and grab the total sales from the row before each one of these rows. And if that doesn't make sense, let's go ahead and do it. I think it'll make a bit more sense. We're going to head up here to Add Column. We're going to add another custom column. And we're going to start off by calling this, let's call this total sales PM for previous month. Okay, well, the first thing we want to do, we're not going to calculate this right off. We're going to do it step by step. The first thing we want to do is go ahead and just grab the added custom step. So the previous step, the entire thing. So we're going to use a hashtag, quotation mark, added custom, right? So now every single element in this column, let's click OK. Every single element in this column is going to have the previous step, or basically this entire table right here. Okay, so now that we've got that, what we can do is we can grab an individual row from this table, and we're going to use the previous row ID to make sure we grab the row previous to whatever row we're in right here. So if let's say I'm in this row right here. Well, if I were to grab row 1, I would grab the current row. But if I grab row 0, I grab the previous row. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's head over here to our gear icon. So we're going to grab an entire row, which is going to turn into a record, which means we need to use our curly braces. Well, which row do you want to grab? Do you want to grab the first row? Do you want to grab the second row? No, well, we want to grab the row that is equivalent to the previous row ID calculation that we made just a second ago. So if I double click here and click OK, now for each one of these, each element here, if you ignore this error for just a second, what you'll find is that you've got the previous row as a record. So here we've got month 2/1/2014, we've got the total sales, the row ID, and the previous row ID. Well, that's equivalent to this right here. So why did we get this error right here? Well, we tried to grab the row -1, and there is no row -1, so we end up with an error. So we're going to go ahead and fix that real quick. There's a lot of ways to handle this. We're going to use, I don't know if it's the most mathematically accurate method, but it'll work pretty well. So we're going to use a try. So we're going to try and grab the previous row ID, right? And if that doesn't work, I'm going to do otherwise, paste. Well, we don't want the previous row. Why don't we just do the current row? So when we actually end up doing our sales change calculation, it'll end up being 0, but we're not going to worry too much about that right now. So I'm going to click OK. So now, for every row past the first one, we've got this record here which has the total sales month and all this other stuff from the previous row, right? Okay, so now all we have to do is extract the total sales value from each one of these records, and we'll end up having the previous month's total sales. So all I need to do is grab the total sales value right here. So to do that, I'm going to click on the gear icon. And right now, this whole thing grabs just one row, and so we want to grab total sales from that resulting record. So we're just going to do square braces, or square brackets, total sales. And down here, square brackets, total sales. Make sure I did that right. Okay, so now when I click OK, now rather than getting a record, we actually have the previous month's total sales in every row except the first one. The first one's just got that same row's previous sales. So now, just to make it a little easier to look at, I'm going to go ahead and left click there, shift click there, right click and remove to get rid of those columns, just so we can see this a little bit easier. So right now for this month, we've got the total sales of that. And here for total sales previous month, well, we've got that value, which is the same value as that right there. And so here, for this month, we've got the total sales this month, and we've got the total sales from the previous month, which is that value right there. So we've correctly calculated the total sales from the previous month. So now if we want to calculate the change, well, it's pretty easy. We're just going to add a custom column, and we're going to call this total sales change from PM for previous month. Well, that's just the current month's total sales minus the previous month's total sales. We click OK. All right, this isn't the most useful metric in the world, but it's pretty easy to calculate. And here what we can see is for every month besides the first one where we had to do that sort of try otherwise construct, for every other month, we've got how much the sales are up or how much the sales are down. So we could see here, for this month, the sales are up, looks like just over 21,000, and for this month, they're down by about 3,000, and so on and so forth. So there's other ways to handle this problem, but I think this one illustrates the idea pretty well of how you can refer to, you could use an index to refer to a single element or a single value from the row before, which is pretty easy to do in something like Excel, but here in Power Query is pretty tricky to do. So that's a pretty good method to handle that problem. All right, well, I do hope that was helpful, and I will see you next video.